broken almost in half. Well, it's broken in half after the door. So there's a part of the car, the door, the window, and then just shot.
Some passengers lost limbs, others were completely in shock as emergency personnel carried them away. It would be 4.5 hours before the last victim would be rescued. So right now, the investigation continues. We are told the conductor of the train has been questioned by both SEPTA police and the NTSB. He has also undergone a drug test. And of course, we will have an update for you tonight on Action News at 5:30 and at 6 o'clock. Until then, I'm Rick Williams reporting live on the Action Cam from the Market-Frankford line near 30th Street Station. Back to the studio.
All right, thank you, Rick. A very tragic and frightening story.
And we have much more on it now, Lisa, and some still coming in, because late this afternoon, National Transportation Safety Board officials finally allowed some camera crews to get into the tunnel to get a close-up view of that train inside the tunnel, and you can see just how violent that crash must have been. It looks something like a soda can that was crushed. The force of the impact, of course, on the one car that hit the poles. The cars, however, behind it suffered much less damage. The number 4 car is the one that hit the poles, and it took most of the blow as it jumped the track. Now, most of the victims from the tragedy were taken to Presbyterian Hospital and the Hospital of University of Pennsylvania, both in West Philadelphia. Let's get a report now from Lucy Yang at the scene.
Things are finally starting to slow down here after a hectic day at emergency centers all across the city. The injured began pouring into area hospitals shortly before 10 o'clock this morning, and the emergency staffs were said to be ready and waiting. Although trauma centers braced for the worst today, fortunately, most of the injuries coming in were relatively minor. Bumps and bruises, scratches and sprains. However, there is the shock factor that is not always visible. Doctors fear that could leave some of the riders with emotional scars.
We have a factor of stress, and the victims of the event may immediately feel depressed, agitated, they may be somewhat disoriented. It's called a psychological shock, if you will.
Thomas Sweeney is an X-ray technician. He treated some of the riders he himself saw trapped this morning. Sweeney says he stepped off the train just seconds before it derailed.
There were a lot of people all over the place, and it really looked pretty bad.
Pandemonium?
Yes, literally pandemonium. And everybody who was on the trolley car gasped, and people were saying to themselves, like, my dear Lord, what's happened here?
Outside of those who were killed, there were more than 150 injured and taken to nearby hospitals. Fortunately, most of the riders suffered only minor injuries and are at home this evening. However, doctors still worry about possible emotional scars which do not show up on any kind of X-ray, and that shock factor could register even days after today's accident. That's it from the hospital at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm Lucy Yang, live on the Action Cam. Back to the studio.
Thanks, Lucy. Now, the train accident has indirectly followed up the evening rush hour situation. The disrupted train service has been replaced with buses. Let's take a look at the picture from Chopper 6 right now, which is high above Market Street in West Philadelphia, and it's pretty bad traffic out there coming out of the city, and that is because Chestnut Street was closed so that they can run buses back and forth. Let's go on the ground to Dan Cuellar and get the report from Chestnut Street. Dan?
Mark, people have been pouring into a steady stream of emergency shuttle buses going in and out of the center city area on Chestnut Street. Take a look at this caravan and you can see how massive this project really is. Over here you see people packing into these buses. Most of these buses have been filled to capacity with people trying to get out of center city and eventually to their homes. There has been mass confusion, and SEPTA personnel have been on hand trying to tell people what's closed and what's not.
What you say is you don't know, and you don't know how to say all that. Go on a bus and go wherever you want to go.
Police, who have been spread thin for this ordeal, finally managed to get around here and close 55 blocks of Chestnut Street to vehicular traffic in trying to deal with the emergency. This is the scene as it has been for almost 2 hours now, with people crowding into every available shuttle bus, and the bus drivers, of course, shaking their heads and trying to make the best of it, as are commuters, most of whom have been remarkably good-natured about this mess. Here's the way the situation stands now, as we have said throughout the afternoon. Chestnut Street between 5th and 60th Street will remain closed to vehicular traffic at least until late tomorrow morning to allow for a steady stream of emergency shuttle buses. The buses will stop at regular L stops only. The Frankfurt Market L remains closed between 15th and 52nd Street because of the accident and will stay closed at least until mid-afternoon tomorrow. We have these updates to pass along to you. The eastbound exit ramps on the Schuylkill Expressway at 30th and Spring Garden Streets have been reopened now, but be prepared for congestion in those areas. Also, Market Streets between 20th and 34th Streets has been reopened in both directions now. So there you have it, some areas reopened, but there will still be a lot of congestion in the Center City area. As best we have it, that is the situation from Center City. Most of the congestion will remain through mid-afternoon tomorrow. I'm Dan Cuellar, live on the Action Cam.
Thank you, Dan. Now, of course, if you're a commuter or you're waiting for a commuter and you don't know what's going to happen here, SEPTA has some special phone numbers that you can call. Let's show them to you right now. They are 574-1142 through 1145. That's SEPTA service 574-1142, 43, 44, and 45. And now to repeat once more, the big story today, 3 people are dead, more than 140 have been injured after a SEPTA train derailed on the Market-Frankford L. We will have much more on the story coming up later. At 5:30, we'll update you on the injuries, and Robin Garrison will take a look at how the emergency team at one hospital responded to all of this. And then at 6, John Rollins will take a closer look at how the tragedy...
The accident could have started with a dropped motor under the train.
Right now, let's go live to Action News reporter Rick Williams, who is on the scene of the crash just west of the 30th Street train station. Rick?
Well, Mark, officials with the National Transportation Safety Board have been on the scene since about 3 o'clock this afternoon. They are still down there, of course, surveying the wreckage and trying to determine exactly what caused this accident this morning. We are told they will be here for much of the day into the evening. We are also told they will be moving pieces of the mangled car to get a closer look at it. Of course, they also want to look at this motor, which is said to have dropped from the train and was dragged about a mile along the tracks, which, of course, officials say seemed to trigger off some type of switcher on the tracks, which caused the train to derail and cause one of the worst accidents in SEPTA's history. So that is the status right now. SEPTA officials with the NTSB here, they will be here for much of the evening, and they say they should have something definitive by late tonight. And of course, we'll have an update for you tonight on Action News at 6. Until then, I'm Rick Williams reporting live on the Action Cam from the Market-Frankford line. Back to the studio.
Thank you, Rick. Now, needless to say, this crash has created chaos for rush hour commuters. There has been a good deal of the train section shut down. There is no Market-Frankford L running from the Suburban Street station out to 52nd Street, and so SEPTA has put buses into service, and they've turned Chestnut Street into simply a bus road, closing it to all cars. So, of course, some other traffic that might have been coming in on Chestnut now has to come in on Market Street. Let's go live to Dan Cuellar in Center City with more on this madhouse rush hour. Dan?
Well, Mark, the mass exodus out of Center City continues under these adverse conditions, and I can tell you that the organization has paid off, because right now it appears to be tapering off. People are moving along. You can see the traffic here on 15th Street, all organized. You don't have any more than the usual congestion in Center City. People are packing into the buses as they have been for the last 2 hours now. Free shuttle buses to get them out of Center City and hopefully to the places that they need to go. This is the situation as we see it now from Chopper 6. You can see a live picture now to give you an overview of the situation. As you can see, it's starting to ease off. Vehicles moving along, which underscores the fact that the exodus has been moving along despite the confusion over how people were going to get home. We can tell you that the Frankfurt L, as you said, will remain closed between 15th and 52nd Street at least through mid-afternoon tomorrow. Chestnut Street will remain closed to all except shuttle buses at least till late tomorrow morning. So again, it appears that the organization here, despite earlier confusion, is paying off, traffic moving along smoothly. I'm Dan Cuellar, live on the Action Cam in Center City.
All right, thank you, Dan. Whenever there is a crisis like this, the area's hospitals must be prepared. Robin Garrison reports tonight on how local hospitals ready themselves for the overwhelming demand for medical treatment.
A friend this morning when the train derailed.
Starting crying and screaming, trying to get help. It was panic.
But the panic apparently ended once Antonio got to Presbyterian Medical Center. The entire staff here was put on emergency alert when the accident happened. Extra staffers, including hospital security commander Koshi Pappy, were called in from home.
And what did they say when they called you?
Plan C is in effect.
And you knew exactly what that meant?
Yes, sir.
Presbyterian and most other hospitals in the area have contingency plans for every kind of emergency. The biggest problem today was the sheer number of injured. 53 people poured into this emergency room today.
We have to be prepared to keep track of those patients, make sure that the most seriously ill and injured are identified quickly and taken care of, and that we don't lose track of the less seriously ill and make sure that we get to them.
On the Media Westchester line in southwest Philadelphia. Miraculously, most injuries were minor. On the day before Thanksgiving in 1984, one train backed into another at the Narberth station in a crash that sent 250 people to the hospital. And then came a series of accidents that plagued the Norristown high-speed line. 2 weeks before Christmas, 1985, 57 people were hurt when two trolleys collided near the Overbrook station. One man was left a quadriplegic in that accident. 3 teens were later charged with causing that derailment by putting rocks on the tracks. And then in August 1986, an out-of-control trolley slammed into a wall at the 69th Street terminal in Upper Darby. 42 people were hurt. 1 later died. SEPTA says the trolley driver left the power on while applying the brakes, then failed to take emergency steps to prevent the crash.
And of course, much more coming up at 6 o'clock on the accident. Lisa, other news?
What they saw.
What I saw was it was total devastation. It was just destroyed. It was amazing. You see pictures of cars wrapped around telephone poles. This was a whole SEPTA train wrapped around a pole.
Yeah, I thought I was going to die, and I thought I think everybody else thought the same thing. Everyone was screaming, and, you know, it was smoke, and then it just probably just going down, down, down to like a dungeon or something.
Good evening, everyone. Without question, this has been the worst accident in the history of SEPTA. 3 people dead. At last count, 157 people injured as a Market-Frankford L train goes off the tracks and is peeled apart like a tin can. Channel 10's Luann Kahn was at the scene minutes after it happened. She's live with the very latest tonight. Luann?
Diane, we are standing in what was the triage area, an emergency medical area for passengers being taken off the train. We witnessed that for hours ongoing this morning. Behind me is the wreckage about 100 yards. You see some SEPTA workers, investigators still picking up pieces, looking for any evidence they can as to what actually caused this accident.
We was in the car right in front of us. It like swung over and it hit the one of the guardrails on the track, and you can see the roof had caved in.
There's no way you can even get near the people. They're still kind of removing the debris and moving parts of the car away from people.
Dozens walked away from the wreckage that some could only describe as looking like a battlefield. Many others, suffering life-threatening injuries, were carried out by hundreds of emergency personnel. And then there were 7 people who could not move.
They bleeding. They in there bad. Like one guy, his waist is like that. He's stuck in there, and they holding on to him like this.
For 4.5 hours, crews worked to save those passengers' lives.
Actually, the train was split in half by the poles that support the subway here. So when it cut the train this way and also cut it in half, it just actually wrapped it right around these people. So it had to be done very slowly. We had to be careful for them because we used some tools. We wanted to make sure we didn't start any fires.
Some of the survivors actually came out wearing pieces of the train. 3 of them could not be saved in time. But then there was the last man out.
His name was Eric. I don't know his last name, but he's a very brave kid. And it was very difficult to get him out. He's going to be fine. He's a strong kid, and he said he was studying to be a minister. And God was with him today because he came about 3 inches of not making it. And he's going to be okay.
Larry, what is so incredible is when you look at that wreckage and realize that more people did not die, and I think a lot of credit has to be given to all of the personnel who worked so quickly and efficiently down here this morning. Larry, back to you.
Thanks for the update, Luann. Without question, the worst accident in SEPTA history, also without question, one of the biggest rescue operations in the history of Philadelphia. Minutes after the crash, hundreds of rescue workers poured underground to attend to the over 100 people injured. Channel 10's Terry Ruggles raced to Presbyterian University Medical Center, where more than half the injured were taken today.
5 and 6 at a time they came, in police wagons, rescue vans, ambulances. People who started the morning as commuters who were suddenly accident victims.
We're going to have a little plane, but I want you to deal with it, okay?
It was falling down on us, the glass.
everything was falling down on us, and everybody was like falling on each other, right? Trying to comfort each other. It was the worst sight I ever seen, worst thing I ever been in.
Everybody was screaming and crying. It was awful.
Just let all these people come in first.
Some needed wheelchairs, a few stretchers. Orderlies helped some, and other accident victims were able to walk into emergency rooms under their own power.
The majority of injuries were minor injuries, largely contusions, bruises,